We're going to have the heel in line with the hip. We want to prioritize maximum extension of the knee. We're going to go into dorsiflexion of ankle, inversion of ankle, and for this one, no medial or lateral rotation. We want the femur in a neutral position. Everything else is the same. Anteversion of pelvis without going into extension of the lumbar. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to be your own therapist by demonstrating the top 5 myofascial stretching exercises for posture correction. And more specifically, I'm going to be teaching you how to correct the posterior pelvic tilt. But before I get on with the exercises, I first want to quickly recap what exactly a posterior pelvic tilt is and why exactly you should care. A posterior pelvic tilt, or a retroversion of the pelvis, is when your pelvis is tilted posteriorly. Ideally for men, anywhere from 4 to 7 degrees of anteversion or an anterior pelvic tilt is going to be acceptable, and for women, anywhere from 7 to 11 degrees. Whenever it falls below that, that's when it's going to be considered dysfunctional, and if you don't address it, it can lead to things like low back pain, hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, and also foot pain, so you would want to address it immediately. And one of the ways in which we could correct this would be to do some strengthening exercises for the muscles that are responsible for anteversion of the pelvis or anteriorly tilting the pelvis. We ended up doing those a couple days ago. I'm going to include a link right up over here to the top 5 strengthening exercises for posture correction to correct the posterior pelvic tilt. But once you've done those exercises, a terrific complement to those exercises would be to do some myofascial stretching exercises for the muscles that are responsible for posteriorly tilting the pelvis. That's what we're going to be doing today, and without further ado, here are the top 5 myofascial stretching exercises for posture correction to correct a posterior pelvic tilt. The first myofascial stretching exercise for posture correction to correct a posterior pelvic tilt is going to be for the hamstring group. If you recall, the hamstring group is made up of 3 muscles: the semimembranosus, which is the most medial, the semitendinosus right down the middle, and then the biceps femoris, which is the most lateral. For each of them, we're going to be in a seated position, and what we want to do is take the contralateral leg, and we are going to go into flexion of the hip and knee. At the ankle, dorsiflexion of the ankle by pointing the toes toward our head, eversion of the ankle by pointing the sole of the foot away from our body, and then we want to drive our knee down toward the ground. For this one right over here, what we want to do is maintain anteversion of the pelvis. So we want to bring our ischial tuberosities and roll them forward, but we want to go into anteversion without going into extension of the lumbar spine. We want to maintain a flat lumbar spine, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown and head up, eyes looking down to the floor to put the dura mater under tension with the arms, maximum extension of elbow and wrist, maximum external rotation. And then if we want to target the semimembranosus, because the semimembranosus is the most medial, we want to take our heel and place it outside of our hip. We're going to go into maximum extension of the knee. We're going to go into dorsiflexion of the ankle, inversion of the ankle, and then for this one, we want to go into lateral rotation of the femur, so point the toes away from your body. Then, what we want to do from here is go into hip flexion. We're going to do that by driving the umbilicus forward. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the semimembranosus. If we want to target the semitendinosus, almost identical. The only difference is because the semitendinosus is down the middle, we're going to have the heel in line with the hip. We want to prioritize maximum extension of the knee. We're going to go into dorsiflexion of ankle, inversion of ankle, and for this one, no medial or lateral rotation. We want the femur in a neutral position. Everything else is the same. Anteversion of pelvis without going into extension of the lumbar spine, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown and head up, eyes looking down, arms, maximum extension of elbow and wrist, maximum external rotation of shoulders, then get into hip flexion by driving the umbilicus forward. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the semitendinosus. And then the last one is for the biceps femoris. Because the biceps femoris is most lateral, we want to bring the heel in toward the midline. At the knee, we want to go into maximum extension of knee, dorsiflexion of ankle, inversion of ankle, and for this one, we're going into medial rotation of the femur, so point the toes in toward the midline. Then, from here, everything else is the same. Anteversion of pelvis was all going into extension of the lumbar spine, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown and head up, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension with the arms, maximum extension of elbow and wrist, maximum external rotation of shoulders, and then go into hip flexion by driving the umbilicus forward. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the biceps femoris. Next, the second myofascial stretching exercise for posture correction to correct a posterior pelvic tilt is going to be for the gluteus maximus muscle. For the gluteus maximus, there's going to be 2 different stretches that we're going to be taking you through, and both of them are going to be in a supine position, meaning you're going to be laying down in your back. You want to go ahead and take the contralateral hip, and you're going to go into flexion of the hip and knee. Contralateral meaning the opposite leg. We want to bring it beyond 90 degrees. The reason we're doing that is because when the femur goes beyond 90 degrees, the gluteus maximus reverses its action. From here, we want to go into dorsiflexion of ankle by pointing the toes toward our head, eversion of ankle by pointing the sole of the foot away from us, and then we want to maintain anteversion of the pelvis without going into extension of the lumbar spine, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown and head away, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. Then we want to take the ipsilateral leg, so the leg that we're working, and we are going to wrap it around the knee. The reason we're wrapping it around the knee is because we want to induce an adduction, and this right over here is going to be specific for the anterolateral fibers. Then from here, what we want to do is dorsiflexion of ankle, eversion of ankle. We're going to take our arms and we're going to go ahead and grab our tibia, and then we want to pull it without losing the anteversion of the pelvis and without going into extension of the lumbar spine. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the gluteus maximus muscle, and specifically this right over here is for the anterolateral fibers. And then if we want to target the posteromedial fibers, everything is exactly the same. The only difference is we want to go into abduction of the femur, and we're going to do that by taking the ankle and putting it over the knee instead. So for this one right over here, the only difference is we take the ankle, we're going to put it on our knee, and then we're going to go into abduction by driving the knee away from our body. Then take your arm, grab a hold of your tibia, and everything else is exactly the same. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the gluteus maximus muscle, and specifically the posteromedial fibers. Next, the third myofascial stretching exercise for posture correction to correct the posterior pelvic tilt is going to be for the gluteus medius muscle, and specifically we are going to be targeting the posterior fibers because the posterior fibers are responsible for retroversion of the pelvis. For this one right over here, we want to be in a seated position, and then with the contralateral leg, so the leg opposite to the side that we're stretching, you are going to go into extension of the knee. We then want to go into dorsiflexion of the ankle, inversion of the ankle, medial rotation of the femur, and we want to bring the heel slightly into adduction by bringing the heel in toward the midline. Then from this position right over here, with the ipsilateral leg, so the leg of the side that we're stretching, we want to go ahead and flex the hip and knee, plant the foot firmly on the floor. We're going to go into dorsiflexion of ankle by pointing the toes toward the sky, eversion of ankle by pointing the sole of our foot away from our body, and then from here we want to go into anteversion of the pelvis. We're going to go into anteversion by driving the ischial tuberosities forward, and we want to go into anteversion without going into extension of the lumbar spine. We want flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown of head up, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. Then with the ipsilateral arm, so the arm of the same side that we're stretching, maximum extension of elbow and wrist, maximum external rotation of shoulder. And then with the contralateral arm, what we're going to do is we're going to reach, we're going to grab the knee, and we're going to pull the knee across to induce an adduction. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the gluteus medius, specifically the posterior fibers. Next, the fourth myofascial stretching exercise is going to be for the adductor magnus. For the adductor magnus, we are going to be in a quadruped position, meaning your 4-point. Then from this one position right over here, there's going to be 3 different variations. I'm going to be taking you through the setup. It's going to be exactly the same for each of them. We want to be in retroversion of the pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown of head up, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. Then, if we want to target the proximal fibers, the superior fibers, what we're going to do is we're going to be propped up on our hands. We want to go into maximum abduction of the femurs, so we're going to spread our knees as far apart as we can. Then we want to go into medial rotation of the femurs by driving the ankles outside of our legs. We're going to drive our medial malleolus down toward the ground. Then again, maximum retroversion of the pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown head away, eyes looking down to the floor to put the dura mater under tension. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the adductor magnus, and specifically this one right over here is for the superior fibers. If we want to target the the middle fibers, all we're going to do differently is we're going to drop down to our elbows, and we want our heels in line with the knees. Everything else is the same. Retroversion of pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown head away, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the adductor magnus, specifically the middle fibers. Then, if we want to target the inferior fibers, exactly the same, only difference is we're bringing our heels inside of our knees, so our heels together, and we want to go posteriorly with the hips, so we're going to sit back down onto our calves. Everything else is the same. Retroversion of pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown head away, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the adductor magnus, and specifically that one right over there is going to be for the inferior fibers. And then lastly, we have the myofascial stretching exercise for the rectus abdominis. This is the 5th and final myofascial stretching exercise for it. There's going to be 3 different progressions. The easiest one, you're going to be in a prone position. So you're going to be lying down on your stomach. You want your elbows right underneath your shoulders. And then for this one right over here, all we're going to do is go into trunk extension. This is the easiest one. Then the second level of difficulty, if this is still too easy, what we can do is straighten out our arms. We want to straighten out our arms to get a little bit more myofascial tension on the rectus abdominis, but we want to make sure that the pubic symphysis remains pinned down to the ground. And the reason we're doing that is the pubic symphysis is where the rectus abdominis attaches. So only go as high as you can without letting your pubic symphysis leave the ground. Next, the third variation, this is going to be the most difficult one and the most challenging. What we want to do is get into a supine position, so you are going to be laying down on your back, and this one right over here is essentially a hip bridge. What we want to do, take your hands, you're going to put your hands underneath your shoulders, and then you want to bring your feet nice and close to your butt, and then we want to go into maximum anteversion of the pelvis and extension of the spine. We're going to do that by going into a hip bridge and raising up toward the sky. And this is the myofascial stretching exercise for the rectus abdominis. And there you have it. Those were the top 5 myofascial stretching exercises for posture correction to correct a posterior pelvic tilt. If you have a posteriorly tilted pelvis, or if you have issues with regard to low back pain, hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, or foot pain, go ahead and give those exercises a try. And if you have given them a try, go ahead and drop your comments down in the comment section and let me know what you guys thought. In terms of the actual sets and duration for the stretches, what you want to do is 3 sets of 30-second holds for each of the stretches, and you want to do them every single day. Well, the reason that we're going to be doing them every single day is because we're trying to elicit a postural change. And when we are trying to elicit a postural change, the most important thing is going to be accumulating time under tension. So if we only do these stretches once a week or once a month, we're not going to be seeing the true benefit. So 3 sets, 30 seconds every single day is what you want to do for the myofascial stretching exercises. And then this coming Monday at 2:00 p.m., I'm going to be going through another issue that may arise that may lead to a posterior pelvic tilt, and that is going to be nerve dysfunction. I'm going to be taking you through the top 5 ELDOA exercises for posture correction to correct a posterior pelvic tilt, because if the nerves are not sending the proper signal to the muscles that are responsible for anteversion of the pelvis, then that could shut off function to those muscles, and that could lead to a posterior pelvic tilt. But we're going to be getting into those on Monday at 2:00 p.m. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to keep making these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.